What does the Ruin DLC for FNAF Security Breach hide from the player during the entire game? Ruin takes the colorful world of Security Breach and completely destroys it. In this video, you'll see how the game works behind the scenes from a game developer's point of view. I painstakingly broke down every chapter to show you out-of-bounds things, alongside how the animations work in slow motion. I'll also be breaking the game too in some funny ways, so I hope you enjoy this complete deep dive into the Five Nights at Freddy's Ruin DLC. As we enter the Pizzaplex once again in the Ruin DLC, we can see that everything is in shambles and seemingly deserted. This time the game has a more linear experience. However, beyond this rubble lies quite a lot of interesting things. So as always, let's do a very brief recap of everything we'll be covering. You start the game as Cassie, as you climb into the literal ruins of the Pizzaplex. You get yourself a flashlight as you make your way to a walkie-talkie where the voice of Gregory can be heard. An elevator almost cuts your head off, but you press on and climb into a damaged vent that eventually collapses. While making your way through the trashed room, Chica jumpscares you, and then you ultimately obtain the Faz wrench. You use your level 99 thieving to lockpick a door, before making your way down a crumbling stairwell, like a true urban explorer. That's when you reach a water maintenance area, and Monty climbs out of a pipe, knocking you into the water below. And then the Security Breach Ruin logo pops up onto the screen. Now in Monty Golf, you get forced to take a creepy mask, which allows you to Majora's Mask your behind Link to the Past style to a dark world. An augmented reality world that intersects with your own. Of course, no better time to try out some Monty Golf. Past this arcade, you must make your way around the ruins of Monty Golf while deactivating nodes and avoiding the furry version of the villain from Scooby-Doo and the Cyber Chase. Eventually, you come to the Daycare, where the chapter comes to a close. Okay, recap done. So let's dive in. So starting off, the newspapers blocking out the window read, Pizzaplex destroyed. Earthquake shatters Pizzaplex, temporarily closed. And as Cassie is making her way into the Pizzaplex ruins, we can take a closer look at our lower quality model. A lot of stuff in this game, to my understanding, was processed with Insta-LOD, which is a software integration / pipeline used to generate LODs or level of detail models. So we can see Cassie appear with a lower quality appearance as she is farther away from the camera. Her face looks rigid, and her fingers look like they are from the Nintendo 64. She also has a pole piercing through her body. Before letting the intro animation play out, we can see the world beyond her is full of bright light, scaffolding, and floating trees. This part of the game lets you see a lot, but we are limited in where we can go. So flying around through the ruins of the Pizzaplex down below is honestly pretty cool. Beyond the mysterious beyond, I catch a glimpse of a faraway object. And it turns out it is the edges of a very compressed skybox, or in this case, a sky dome because it's rounded. The game has the fog and bloom out here looking a little extra, but if we stop moving, we can start to see the sky dome around this area. Cutting out some of the fog, we can get a better view of this. It's a blown out tree line with grass below it and a whitish blue sky above it. Backing the camera up a ton lets you appreciate the scale of it and the water drop-like shape. Oddly, beneath this entire map there is an object, and it is a piece of wall that is only rendered on one side. So let's head back up top now. So Cassie is now entering the scene, and her model is no longer the lower quality version due to how close our camera is. She starts off by just sliding into the opening of the broken window area. Her eyes roll to the back of her head for a moment in a totally not creepy manner. She then hops down and calls out to Gregory. As this initial animation finishes, the first-person camera arms load in on top of the model, as the rest is obscured. Something I found odd is that our left hand looks like it has the Fazbear display screen on it, but the watch is missing and the screen is static, as the Faz watch is only used in Security Breach. We can see our hand is already holding the walkie-talkie too. So the first thing I want to do is head out of bounds and explore the bottom area of this destroyed building. And I quickly realize that's going to be a problem. So this DLC puts death barriers under every single map section as a failsafe in case the player falls to the ground. So I just die when jumping down below. And this is done to prevent falling forever, but to also hide the AR world secrets, which I'll eventually cover. We can't explore outside the building though, as the scaffolding we start on can be walked on. Things look pretty strange out here though, but we can make our way down below and walk along the front doors of the building. However, going any further beyond that will kill us. Walking behind the walls of the lobby is kinda spooky though, as now everything is shrouded in darkness. And some areas don't even have collision, so we fall straight through to our death. Trying to go to the main lobby area that's blocked off causes death as well, as none of the objects have any sort of colliders active. So normally, the game prevents you from proceeding without a flashlight, but obviously we can do this with cheating. But on my first playthrough, I thought the staff bot jump scare was a second chance at a flashlight. Turns out you can't pick up the flashlight even if you don't have one. We're also going to skip the walkie-talkie too. Just know that for the rest of the gameplay in this area, Gregory won't shut up, and I endured that for hours. We now have the elevator jump scare, which takes place while we're on the ladder. Going up top, we'll see that no elevator is present. However, that's when I discover some floating black rectangles out of bounds, and I go over to them. All of them have collision, so we can walk on them, and what you're seeing here is the unloaded area that will eventually be where Chica and Monty are at. This is just the boxing of the area that was preloaded before any other assets appeared. Back by the elevator though, we can see that as we start climbing up the ladder, the elevator will just spawn above us. Now, we are watching this in slow motion, but we can see the elevator descend along with all the textures, decals, and particle effects that are used during the crash sequence. As it reaches the bottom, we can see that it just immediately stops. We then go back to climbing up the ladder and go into the vents. So this is what the vents look like that we're climbing through. And now we can see the rest of this environment loaded in while we're climbing the ladder. We have some empty rooms with checkered floors that we'll be checking out later, but we also have some objects hidden out of bounds. There are 2 pairs of duplicate railings stored out of bounds at different locations, and here is one of them. Back in the vents though, I want to watch this crash happen in third person. In case you're curious, you can walk on top of the vents past where the crash happens, and you'll eventually just fall through the vents into the room. But let's break this thing now. We can see the vents start to collapse and fall down below, but the game does something interesting as they fall. Because the vents are part of a cutscene, they will eventually despawn when that cutscene is over. So the game instead creates a duplicate part of the vent that the cutscene vent eventually falls into and unloads. This is so that when the player turns around, they can still jump up against the vent and it has physical mass. So this trashed room normally has a startling noise that occurs before you get to Chica, and pulling the camera back reveals it's just the audio and nothing actually moves. But before triggering Pizza Corpse Gal, we're gonna swim through some trash and head out of bounds. So the first set of blocked doors lead to nowhere, but we can walk on the floor back here. And while I'm walking around out of bounds, I notice something peculiar in the distance. Way in the distance, we can find Chica T-posing with a metal staircase. Now, immediately, I'm thinking, oh, this is where they store Chica before she jump scares you. Usually models and animation assets are loaded in early and are stored out of bounds, so game performance doesn't dip, since they no longer have to load in that asset the second it is used. But here we have Chica, shouldering the weight of this staircase all by her lonesome. So I go over there to make her life even worse, as I run around and jump on this staircase. It has collision, so we can walk here. My floating pair of arms are causing Chica all sorts of dread. Now, when we move forward in this room, we do get jump scared by Chica. And the second this happens, we can see this Chica vanishes. The second we hit this trigger, Chica warps over to this spot and the animation plays out. We can watch it in all its glory in slow motion though. Chica's probably the grossest looking animatronic in the game, man. She's literally covered in cobweb cheese. The thought of that just grosses me out. So earlier I mentioned there are 2 rooms here with checkered floors that are inaccessible. And we can see them in this overhead shot right here. We can enter these rooms though and walk around. Both rooms are the same and are empty, so nothing too exciting, so let's move on. So we're going to just T-1000 our way through this door and skip the Faz wrench for this toolless adventure we're doing. And as we walk down this staircase, we will encounter the blob, which in the game files is now dubbed as Tangle, similar to the tentacles in the security breach ending. So let's take a look at this big fella before he nopes the heck out of here. So this creepy mass is just lurking in this hole, and their neck is super long. Their entire body is actually stored out of bounds, just clipping through the wall. It looks very strange. It makes me wonder what the blob was doing too, because it isn't facing the player at this moment. So the blob is actually triggered by both the player's position and the camera direction from what I can tell. And behind the scenes, we can see how they retract into the wall. Normally this happens super fast, but we are of course slowing this down so we can appreciate the animation put into this Funtime Freddy mask. The head then whips around and pulls up as the body for some reason starts clipping through the wall. I'm pretty sure a fast player could see the body do that if they were positioned right. The blob then unloads. Next up we have the waterworks area, and the light jump scare isn't all too interesting, so let's take a look at the whole place. So there's several dead ends in this area, and I want to see what was actually past them. If we go beyond the first blockade we encounter, we can see there is a lower level with metal gratings. We can walk on this, but as you may have guessed, jumping to the lowest level kills us. Next up, we have the bent gate that looks like Monty climbed under, and while we can walk back here, nothing back here beyond the initial platform has collision, as I once again die. This time I have the power of God and anime on my side, and I'm able to give some collision back to this area. As you can see, there isn't a whole lot to it. It's a square section that just abruptly ends. And nearby, we can see the waterway that we eventually fall into. I throw on my iron boots and go for a walk down here, and although you can't hear it, the trash and stuff does make different walking noises as we explore. Of course, once I take off my protective boots, I fall through the floor, and die, since there isn't any base collision down here. But now let's take a look at this cutscene. So while getting prepped for the cutscene, I noticed there is a box stored absurdly far above the map. It's a fragile parts and service container, so it's probably Italian. But I don't know why this is up here at all. It's insanely high above the map. There's also a section of flooring out here too. Anyways, if we look down the pipe that Monty comes out of, we won't be able to see him, and it actually is sealed with concrete at the bottom. I tried looking for Monty, but he's hidden very well on this map, and he's much easier to find once we enter Monty Golf. But the second we trigger this cutscene, Monty will spawn in the pipe and start climbing up after us. He just sort of clips to the sides of the pipe as he's coming up, but watching it in slow motion, we can see his spine never moves. It just drags through the metal pipe. Swapping the angle, we can now see our floating flashlight, which I did not pick up, mind you. Our arms then appear, and Monty lunges at us and swipes through our hand completely. We then leap backwards into the water as Monty begins to clip through the roof. This cutscene happens so fast, so it's really nice to see things slowed down. It's not very obvious that Monty's spine is more like a scarecrow post, and I'm sure he'd be great friends with Cable Crow from Zardy's Maze. As we hit the water, Monty begins to clip through the wooden banister as his hand is raised in the air. His hand pokes through the wood, and then he eventually vanishes. Down below, we're taking swimming lessons in the sewers as we get swept away. Real talk, I spent a lot of time just watching all this trash spawn in. There's plushies, chicken wings, trash bags, Faz cams, and a whole lot of weird things. A lit cupcake? Whatever, throw it in the sewer soup. Out of bounds, we can find a T-posting Chica, again, since we skipped her jump scare on this current play session, and a hunched over staff bot, who looks like he's depressed, holding Chica's legs and crying on her frozen T-posing body. And heck yeah, we finally found our boy Monty too, T-posing in the most T-pose possible. But you know what's better than one Monty? Two. Monty Golf has now loaded in, and within that set of objects, we can now find a sewer-like version of Monty just waiting to climb up an invisible pipe. Glorious! What's interesting is that even though at this point there's a big Ruin logo on the screen, the trash keeps spawning in the sewer down below. Perhaps this sewer cutscene used to be longer. And speaking of that Ruin logo, it actually is a 3D model and placed on the map. It's stored inside a black cube, as the logo does the Stranger Things zoom-in thing. If we rotate the camera around, we can see it is indeed a 3D version of the logo, and is extruded backwards to give it depth. Now, after this, we wake up at Monty Golf, and the real fun begins. So you may have already seen this online, but if not, you'll notice in this shot, there appears to be two versions of the map, one above and one below. And that's because the vanity mask we'll be getting soon actually warps us to the lower map, while the normal world is above us. The whole game is like this from this point forward, and it's really cool to just fly around these two versions of the worlds and see all the differences between them. As we make our way through this area while crouching, we hear a bunch of trash and metal moving. But similar to Chica's room, nothing is actually happening visually. This aerial shot as I'm moving my character through the environment shows that nothing actually transpires. In both the AR world and the real world, it looks like we can find floating wet floor bots above the bathrooms that actually contain the ones we can access shortly. At first, I wasn't sure why these guys were up here, but that's when I realized later on this upper part of the map will load in after we've cleared the nodes. But let's move on. We need to get ambushed by a staff bot. So the second we exit this little alcove, a staff bot will immediately grab us. Ignore the weird floating barrels, I'll talk about those in a second. So the bunny-eared robot just pops out with his hands stretched outwards, ready to grab us. We can see that the vanity mask just spawns on the ground beneath where we are standing. A moment later, the staff bot moves a bit, and the vanity mask instantly warps into the robot's hand as he presents it to us. So we grab it and just put it on. We are unable to leave this cutscene no matter what we do. So we have no choice but to plop it onto our face. Just remember, kids, if a stranger tells you to put on a robotic mask, say no, and tell an adult or something. Also, don't climb into destroyed, abandoned buildings where kids go missing. Red flags everywhere. So the second we put on the mask, we get warped down below to the augmented reality version of the map. Our position changes instantly the moment the mask animation fully blocks our screen. It's a really neat trick. Oh yeah, and those floating barrels. They're a possible oversight by the developers. So in the virtual world, lots of objects float around, but for some reason, these barrels have that same effect applied to them. I'm assuming it isn't intentional because they're clipping through the ground and stuff, but if you want to go deep dive game theory on this, you could say the barrels are bleeding over to our world from the virtual one. Our worlds are converging and there is nothing you can do about it. But hey, that's just some floating barrels. Moving on, after navigating through some trash, we come across an area where Monty runs across our screen. We can't really see him too well, and he vanishes very quickly. So let's change that. So now we can see that Monty just spawns basically inside the wall, and he runs through this tree stump object. As we follow this ankle biter out of the tree, we can see he actually passes through the ladder before he even knocks it over. Truly, Monty is one slick half-a-gator. Our lad marches up the boxes, and something interesting happens as he crosses over the paint. So this paint is known as a decal in Unreal Engine, which are materials that are projected onto your meshes/models. And because Monty is passing through it, the paint is then projected onto Monty for a moment. But only for a moment, because this boy gets Thanos snapped a second later. So a lot of areas in Monty Golf are unloaded until key events happen or the player reaches certain destinations. So it's a bit hard to talk about out-of-bounds stuff because a lot of the things will fill in shortly. But now that we've talked about decals, let's show off another one. Because a T-posing Monty out of bounds can be coupled with other objects, including a paint-splattered metal railing. And so Monty gets covered in pink paint, including his mohawk. Glorious. Next up, we have the Monty Golf arcade machine, and I'm going to be honest, there isn't much hidden off camera here. I tried spawning in our character onto the map too, but it was giving me trouble. However, we can take a look at all the courses, so you can see them without all the darkness. So course 1 has some giant mounds of trash and some square-looking water. Underneath the water, there are tons of pipes that we normally can't see very well. In course 2, this is what the whole map looks like. I would have loved to try to walk up this spiral staircase as Cassie if given the chance. I feel like you can appreciate more of this level from up here. Now, course 3 does have some hidden objects, and this is a zoom out of this desert map themed after Roxy Raceway. For starters, we have these black wedge-shaped objects floating above the stage. I think they're leftover ramps, perhaps? We can also fly down the tunnel, which is kinda cool. There's a giant virtual reality cart flying overhead, and way to the right, we can find an untextured billboard sign. I wonder what used to be on it. Hole 4 takes place in a swamp environment with 2 giant alligator heads. This map is basically just a river surrounded by tons of trees, and there isn't much to see. Hole 5 throws a giant cupcake into the mix within this rectangle environment. There's a chandelier above us and piles of trash all around. Out back, we have 2 blue container buildings across the purple poisonous looking water. Course 6 takes us to a pizza paradise. There's giant pizzas, pizza advertisements, and even pizza boxes. Unfortunately, the pizza boxes are empty, but they do have grease stains, which are a nice touch. Level 7 has a lush canyon with a severed roller coaster track running through it. The roller coaster doesn't go anywhere, as both ends abruptly stop. Course 8 is all within the Vanny world, and there isn't a whole lot to see in this purple landscape. There are some large machines outside the tunnel we play in though, and you can't go wrong with Digital Pizza Man. The last course is like the Daycare, and is a ball pit extravaganza. The ball pit itself is just textured hills that look like balls. There's slides all around the level as well. Also, I hate this course. I fell out of bounds like a bajillion times. But that wraps up Monty Golf. So real quick, I did want to mention something about the mask. The mask doesn't 100% teleport you to the other map accurately all the time. Sometimes the map section below is slightly displaced, but in reality, every time you put on the mask, the game warps you a set distance. So if you were out of bounds or flying around by cheating, the mask will make you move down and up whatever that distance amount is. Also, trying to access the stage where Monty died in Security Breach doesn't work because we just fall through it and die. So we make our way to the node area, and because we lack the tool, even despite this normally being an impossible situation, we can't access the nodes. So I have to restart and get that Faz wrench. Now when the Cyber Bunny attacks, the animation that shows up on screen is just a video file playing on loop, or at least from what I can tell, as it's considered a heads-up display element and doesn't have any dimension. The bunny's animation is simply teleporting though, and watching this in slow motion doesn't really show much, other than the cube spawning slowly and the rabbit warping. So, VR Monty is summoned once the security rabbit has caught you, but up top, regular Monty isn't actually above you. He only exists in one of the 2 spaces in this instance. If we linger too long, we'll get jump scared in the real world, and this is what the animation looks like in slow motion. Monty chomps at our face, and the animation then freezes in place on the final frame. Now, when leaving this area, Monty jumps out and knocks on a ramp for us that lets us go up top. But where does Monty come from? Well, Croc Boy just spawns in clipping through these pieces of wood. He then shoots out into the hallway like this. As he lunges forward, the ramp collapses on him and it eventually pushes him through the ground. He'll sit there for just a moment before unloading completely. And this is the last frame of his animation. Moving on, as we make our way to the security office, there is a set of vents that has a Monty doll in it. This vent system is used in the base game after defeating Monty, but here we can't access it. Even if we could, there is an invisible wall preventing us from getting inside. But if we did, we are able to walk around just fine. The vents lead back behind the stage and then just abruptly end. But we can see the section that connects over by the stage too. So now we have Monty banging on this door in the hallway. On my second playthrough, he only hit the door a few times, but on my first playthrough, he hit it over and over again. If we go behind the door, we'll see he's not there, as there's no point in animating him. The door just flexes like it's being hit repeatedly from behind. Kinda strange that someone boarded this door up after the earthquake happened. In case you were curious, the last two doors in this hallway have nothing behind them, and they just lead to nowhere. In the security office area in FNAF Ruin, Monty will be seen trying to squeeze through a door. If we walk up to him, we're gonna get jump scared. But we can see how he appears off camera. He just spawns into place, and watching his animation in slow motion is pretty neat. If we backtrack at all, we will die, even if we try to just instantly warp behind him. It's kinda cool that Crocman's got a sixth sense. After this, we make our way through the warehouse area and then enter the anomaly room. This is where we make that TV vanish. We can walk on top of the ceiling here, and by doing so, we skip the loading zone for the rest of the map. So behind the TV is nothing. Redoing this though, we can just phase through the wall, and now Daycare will be there. But with that, we've entered Chapter 2. So let's run through a very quick recap of the Daycare area in Ruin. You start off running through some arcade cabinets before making your way into the playground. Moon then jump scares you and tries to rip off your forearm, but fails to realize you're Popeye's daughter, and eventually gets blasted by her flashlight. We must then make our way around the Daycare interior, powering up generators to shine lights on Moon, and then ultimately sneaking up behind them and resetting them to Eclipse. We then fly across the map as the door shuts behind us. We now need to make our way into the theater by disabling some nodes, and once inside, the ultimate goal is to dispel the anomalies on the camera system and then climb down this big dude's throat. With that, the Daycare is cleared. So the very first thing I was curious about in the Daycare was the areas surrounding it. Normally, these blocked off staircases would lead us up and around and eventually to the rest of the Pizzaplex. So I totally need to see what's up there in Ruin. Now, as we make our way up these staircases, we'll see that the area up here looks a bit empty. We have several doors and rollerboards in this hallway, but the rooms beyond them don't exist. We're currently in the real world, so looking down below we can see the augmented reality version of this map that appears when you put the Vanny mask on. Swapping between the two worlds, you can see there's a slight difference of map placement between the two. So there are also elevators up here as well, despite them being blocked off down below. There's nothing inside of them, however. The gray and blue gates up here don't open either, but we can find that secret security camera back here that is used to unlock one of the 4 doors in the bonus ending. Running to the front of the Daycare, where we would normally come in, we can see the area is completely empty, and trying to go beyond the main gate leads to nowhere. However, way out in the distance, beyond this main gate, we can find something neat. It's Eclipse Boy in the middle of doing a jumping jack, combining the T-pose and an A-pose. Not too surprising, we can find a severed pair of arms out here holding a flashlight. It looks like Eclipse is stepping all over them too. Seeing as the first jump scare is the moon trying to grab the player, it makes sense these will be stored out here like Chica was in Chapter 1. While they are frozen out here, we can take a closer look at the circuit board in their back. It definitely looks pretty archaic given the technology available within the Pizzaplex. So below this map, we do have the AR version of it that has these purple hazy clouds. And in both versions of the map, we have these star and moon decorations that are actually beneath the floor in both instances. We also have some very impressive out-of-bounds rectangles and ceiling pieces, a rare treat, alongside this thing. It looks like a donut made of slime. Anyone recognize what this is? Let me know in the comments. The last out-of-bounds thing can be found behind the ticket booth area that is normally inaccessible. Back there, we can find 2 floating pencils in the void. So we're gonna kinda break things now. Usually, we encounter Ruined Moon as soon as we enter the Daycare, but if we phase through the wall, we can skip this. This prevents the Daycare attendant from loading in up top. So if we were then to go inside the Daycare and make our way up to a generator, we can click it on and see a very anticlimactic cutscene, as, well, nothing happens. Moon will still yell at us despite not being there. Even though the daycare attendant isn't up top, the trigger for this character still is though. So if we walk up to where we normally reboot them, we'll get jump scared by the moon. Trying to watch this from another angle, this time I actually got the other jump scare where the moon drops down from the ceiling. Watching this play out in slow motion is definitely a treat, as Cassie gets grabbed and then pulled into the air as if the moon is a wallmaster from Zelda. I love the daycare attendant's animations, as there's truly a lot of care put into them. So if the daycare attendant can still kill you, let's try something odd. So I spawn in Glamrock Freddy from the security breach side of things and take shelter inside of him. So Freddy can't get jump scared. So we can now walk over to where the jump scare happens, and we can see that there's a spherical or capsule-shaped collider around where the moon should be. I can't walk through it, and this is where the daycare attendant is standing, although they're currently unloaded. So we're going to eject ourselves right next to them, and we're now going to try to interact with the daycare attendant. And suddenly, they appear as we reboot them. Dang, Cassie, you're so talented. We can watch this play out in slow motion, as Freddy just sits there with his chest cavity open. The arm placement for Cassie is a bit impossible given her size, but because she's just a floating pair of arms, she can do whatever. It's neat watching this reset in slow motion, because normally the animation is very twitchy with a hint of malfunctioning, and I feel like you can appreciate it a bit more. Eventually, the daycare attendant, now dubbed Eclipse, picks us up, and then we begin to magically fly around the daycare. I never really understood how this animatronic can fly, but it is definitely a very convenient way to exit this place. Strangely, I spot the moon version up in the sky while all of this is going on. With it, we can see it is the final frame of the moon jump scare, as Cassie normally gets pulled into the air. Even her arms are up there too. We eventually make it through the front door, and Eclipse makes it painfully clear they don't allow solicitors here, as they slam the door in our face. We can see that as soon as I shut the door and move off to the left, they just unload. But this also triggers the whole daycare interior to unload a moment later. We can see our boy Freddy standing over here with the moon directly above him, and then all of this just goes poof into thin air as Freddy falls. Luckily, he lands on solid ground. Trying to enter the daycare now, we can see there are limited areas we can walk on, and I, accidentally fell into the great beyond, like usual. So what's odd is that when restarting this area, we can find the moon above us. So for some reason, the end frame of the jump scare is just stuck up in the sky under Mr. Fazbear himself. For reference, we have to reboot Eclipse again, so this is before that has taken place. After all that is done, I head back into the unloaded daycare to find Glamrock Freddy again, and as you can see, the moon won't try to jump scare us at all. He just sort of hangs out up there. Only one section of the daycare does not unload, and I believe it's because it is one of the tallest areas that can possibly be seen from elsewhere. We can go over to it in either the AR world or the real one, and we can hear the Cyber Rabbit MXCS load in to try to get us. He just sort of floats in the void and can walk to the edge of where the jungle gym is. Their navigational mesh must still be intact despite the level unloading. If we linger too long, an Endo will warp over here and jump scare us out on our floating fortress. But we still got some jump scare animations to cover in the actual daycare area, so let's rewind time. So as we make our way into the daycare, the first ramp we go up has a jump scare trigger right beyond the yellow square. And when we get just beyond this, we can see the moon just loads in below us and starts grabbing our arm. Moon just sort of hangs there and yanks until eventually they get flashed by the flashlight, and then they fall down below all dramatically. During this free fall, Moon sort of flops around quickly before getting dragged horizontally under where we are standing. If we look down below us, their bodies all jumbled up and their head appears to be cut off. It looks really strange. But to get a closer look, let's do this again. So when we trigger this jump scare, this out of bounds eclipse we talked about before seemingly duplicates itself and then warps over to the map. This time we're going to delete the objects in our way though so we can see better. So now Moon is just kind of floating on nothing while playing out the animation. As they get blinded by the light, they rev up and go under us. We can see that this breaks their neck geometry. This was causing my computer to lag quite a bit, but a moment later, Moon then unloads. So not long after this jump scare, we have to use our Vanny mask to pass through some objects. The second we do so, a malfunctioning eclipse jumps down and begs for us to blast them with some light. A moment later, they then swap to the moon face and fly away. So off camera, we can see that Eclipse just instant transmissions above us as they fall down below. We can watch this play out in slow motion in Tron World as they explain what we have to do. We can also watch Moon pop out with a slick head rotation before this dude just straight up Peter Pans across the room. We can follow this graceful flying motion, and it really makes you wonder just how advanced Fazer technology is. As Eclipse comes to rest up above, we can see the model swap out to the default idle animation. At the same moment, Moon spawns in up above in the real world. While I was up here though, I did want to check out this area that the daycare attendant jumps from in Security Breach. And as you can see, just like a magician, there's nothing behind the curtain, except for these weird light things. Or are they microphones? I can't tell. Let's move on though. So once outside the daycare area, I decided to mess with the cyber rabbit once again. So it turns out, if you were to hide within Freddy the moment the rabbit tries to jump scare you with the instant death buildup, it will break the logic of the game. So this jump scare won't trigger, and you won't die. Instead, the cyber rabbit just soft locks in place and just looks at you. It will no longer pursue you, and it will also not despawn. There's no insanity buildup either, so basically, he's our friend now. Good job, Freddy! Before we head into the theater, there's a room full of junk that we can only enter with the Vanny mask on. This has a collectible bag here, but we can't get in this room in the real world. If we hack our way back here though, we can see how the room is actually laid out, because normally most of the entrance is blocked off. It is just a storage area, but I'm always surprised at just how many products FazCorp has their hands in, including bleach and cleaning supplies. So the theater has a lot of destruction surrounding it in tons of blocked off areas. So let's check out behind some of this rubble. So this cave-in back here prevents you from going to this back hallway, which we'll check out this hallway I'm referring to in a moment. But this other debris blocks off the staircase to the upper level seats. And if we bypass this debris, we can actually reach the top of the theater. This area does have collision, but it is missing some walls, as you can see. However, the platform leading to where the chairs are does not have collision, so we fall into the floor. The banisters and chairs don't have colliders either, so we can just walk through them. But let's take a look at a wide shot of this area so we can appreciate this environment more. Now as I'm flying around, you'll see the AR version of this map down below, but you'll also notice a strange floating vent structure behind the normal world map. And this is one of those areas that does not match up with what the game is trying to have you believe. These vents are used for transitioning to Monty Golf, and we'll check them out in just a second. Way down below, we'll find a single piece of a vent floating in the augmented reality world, and I'm not entirely sure what it is used for. So let's check out this back hallway real quick before showing the magic behind that vent section. So this area is normally where you access the basement below the theater, but as you can see, the staircase in this hallway is gone. However, it's really interesting that this area has graffiti, because that means at one point you might have been able to come back here. Otherwise, why would the developers add graffiti to walls you can never see? It makes you wonder. Now back in the main room, we have to solve the camera anomaly puzzle to move on. And during these camera sections in-game, we can see Cassie is fully modeled. So we can take a closer look at her with the Vanny mask on, which is something you really don't ever see from an outside perspective. The mask clips through her face a bit, but it fits pretty snug. Now the second we clear this puzzle, you'll see the giant endoskeleton instantly appears. This bad boy just spawns, and we're tasked with entering its mouth. Behind the scenes, we can see he's only half an endoskeleton though, and his body stops halfway down. We can get a better look at this endo later on since he doesn't unload. So we hop down into this hole, and the second we touch the ground, there's a trigger to play audio. But this panel we are touching down here has a special property that overwrites the mask's warping ability. So if the player were to warp with the mask under normal conditions, it would place us far above this giant endoskeleton in the real world, which for this section doesn't exist. In fact, it's basically almost in a death plane, so it would kill the player. And putting that mask on up here in the void perfectly lines up with appearing within the endo down below. It also replays the falling audio. In fact, if we toggle on the player's collider, we can have this event play over and over again, while my ears bleed from Cassie's scream. Glorious! But hey, I'm a nice guy, so I'll share my suffering with you. Just take a listen.
Help! Help! Help!
So while the player is touching this energy-looking floor, putting the Vanny mask on will instead warp them vertically and horizontally across the map, something that breaks the normal warping conventions for this mask. So instead, it warps us over to the flooding section of the vents that are out of bounds. And this breaks the building's continuity a bit, as the theater and Monty Golf normally aren't this close together. This also unloads the environment so we can see the giant endoskeleton more clearly now. It looks so happy. Random, but before moving on, I found something odd beneath FNAF Ruin's Daycare. As soon as you load up Chapter 2, our character appears right here. But the second this happens, a Daycare building block begins to fall from the bottom of the map. This is weird because a lot of the objects in this game can't freefall or be pushed by the player, but these blocks can be. And if we were to go to this forever falling box, we can see if we touch it, it goes flying. Not sure why this is here, but it's down here, falling for all of eternity. Now, let's go back to those vents. We can't explore these vents fully though, and we can see that they just sort of abruptly end in the areas we can't view. We can also walk on top of them too for a nice out-of-bounds street. Now, way off in the distance, we can find our ride that we fall into right after these vents. Cassie's arms are stored over here too, as will be some vent-related objects shortly. So the second Cassie starts talking about the vent being creaky, in that same spot, we will now find those vent objects used for the cutscene. And we can watch this collapse take place from behind the scenes. Now the Monty Golf area is loaded in down below, so we can slide into this pipe and straight into our ride. And with that, that brings us to the end of Chapter 2 in the Daycare. The third chapter in FNAF Ruin takes place on the catwalks above Monty Golf. So we start off this chapter in the vents right after the theater. We suddenly fall down into the Monty Golf ride, which takes us through the history of Monty and Bonnie. However, the ride is damaged, so we must hurry and jump out of the ride before it crashes. Cassie then finds herself on the catwalks above Monty Golf, and she must navigate the damaged and slippery scaffolding to locate 4 child security nodes. Along the way, we encounter strange doors that can warp us, and eventually the entity gets banished and can no longer hunt us down. With this, we finish disabling the parent node and once again hitch a ride in a Monty cart. We then make our way to the bakery area as we use our handy-dandy Faz wrench to solve some puzzles. We suddenly see Chica and then drop down below to close out the chapter. So starting off, let's take a look at this Monty ride. Once we exit the vents, we fall down below into this long, winding tunnel. As we enter our cart, we can see that Cassie's arms then fly above the cart and just kind of stay floating there. This is because the arms are no longer needed for the first-person camera. So as the ride moves forward, we can see Cassie's arms stay behind and then just unload. Way out of bounds, we'll find a T-posing set of arms and some railings stored out here, similarly to the previous chapters we've talked about before. What's neat about this area is that it contains both the catwalks and the bottom section we explored as well. So the map really looks impressive when you scale it back and see both the real world and the virtual one. Back in the ride with the lights on, we can see things more clearly now. We can check out Monty's one-man jug band and see that nothing is behind his little cabin. We can also take a closer look at all the character cutouts in the next section, as Monty admires the Glamrock stars. Just ahead we can see Bonnie giving Monty his guitar, but what's interesting is that only half of Bonnie is there. His torso is cut off right behind the red curtain. I'm not sure why this is, because I'm pretty certain this isn't well hidden even during normal gameplay. Right beyond this, we have Roxy helping Monty with her hair. But what I find most interesting is this last section. Monty is now playing on stage, and this cyclone is emitting from his guitar. This has basically destroyed Freddy, and if we check out the cyclone further, we'll see something else. Bonnie was thrown high into the sky at the peak of the cyclone. Poor fella, his cutout is so small too. As we make our way out of this section, panic sets in as the track up ahead is busted. We can watch the cart ahead of us speed up and fall off before us, and we can see it falls down into the great beyond. It continues to fall straight through the virtual world, and ultimately despawns once it falls through. We can follow our cart on the same journey as Cassie jumps out. Our cart clips through the ground and falls to the virtual world as well, before coming to rest beneath it. Suddenly, it is warped across the map, where it lays sideways for a moment before it unloads. Now we're stranded on these catwalks with no ride out of here, which leads us to our next task. We must navigate this area as we search for all the nodes. I will say this was one of my least favorite parts of the game while playing through it as an ant-sized Cassie. Never again. Anyways, the first thing I check out is the golf course down below. I want to see if we can explore down here with Cassie, as we were technically down there in Chapter 1. Before doing so, I got sidetracked while lurking out of bounds. I noticed multiple objects that never unloaded from our previous endeavors, which includes 4 endoskeletons, along with their virtual counterparts, and this little moon toy. Isn't he just cute? Getting back on track though, I activate a flying mod that allows me to, well, fly. It also lets us see what Cassie can and can't stand on. Sadly enough, a lot of the terrain down here has 0 collision. However, it was discovered that all the staircases down here did in fact have collision, allowing us to walk on them. As you can see though, right when I reach the end of this escalator, I fall into the black abyss. Coming back up, I did curiously notice a few random objects down here, which we never normally see to begin with, like this yellow spray can, or this fire alarm, along with a fire extinguisher and this nice stack of cups. Despite the lack of things going on in this area, it was still pretty neat to fly around down here and explore what we normally couldn't. Coming back to the real world, I saw our scaly friend's guitar hiding under the stage where the big hologram of Monty is located. This location in general can only be accessed in the virtual world. As you can see though, we found this guitar, and I'm able to walk around down here with no issue. However, a notable difference is that the virtual world of this area has a path that leads back to the shrine of Monty-related items, and the non-virtual one does not. So with nothing else to explore on this stage, I figured I'd delete these boards blocking the vent and try to make an escape. Of course, this ends with me entering the vent and then predictably falling to my death as I reach the end of the environment's collision. At the other end of this vent, you can see it actually goes on for quite a bit, just minus the collision. Let's go back to the virtual version of this area though, so we can take a closer look at this shrine. Normally, getting to this location involves going down this catwalk that leads to a door-shaped white portal. It brings you down to the stage where this giant Monty hologram towers over you. There's a little path that leads us backstage where we can find this shrine. The shrine is a giant mess of Monty-themed items, just piled on top of each other, which includes some toys, clothing, and cutouts of Monty himself. We can even find Monty's legs sticking out of it from when he gets cut in half in Security Breach. Monty must have a superfan, or perhaps Ruined Monty did this himself to hold onto his pride. Let's get back to the mission at hand though. Originally, the player is tasked with traversing through these slippery catwalks as we hunt down the nodes. Some obstructions lay ahead, which require the player to enter the virtual world and use this mounted Nerf gun to shoot floating Monty heads. I noticed while interacting with the gun that Cassie's arms disappear. Aside from this, nothing outside of normal gameplay takes place. However, once again, I got sidetracked and decided to check out everything that's above the player in this area. I basically do exactly what I did down below. I want to see if anything up here is accessible or has collision. It turns out that everything up here has no collision, minus the random Monty cart. Cassie's able to sit inside the cart securely, but that's about it. Moving on, I find myself not coming across anything that's out of the usual gameplay, as I continue to deactivate the nodes. At one point, we do have this interaction with Monty, which happens quite quickly. As you can see, he just materializes out of the player's sight, then angrily crawls out of the player's view during this interaction. What I do find curious here is that Monty, in theory, could be heading towards the portal that we were talking about before, which leads down to the stage and the shrine of Monty merchandise. So perhaps our gator friend is in fact responsible for the creation of this shrine. Definitely food for thought. This follows with making our way into another portal that takes us to this large cylinder-shaped room. As the player continues forward on this lone catwalk, we're greeted by the entity as it charges towards us. Luckily, it is disabled before reaching us. Unfortunately, this area has a minimal amount of out-of-bounds activity going on. However, we are able to see that this location is not far from the catwalk area we were previously in. As we progress and deactivate the rest of the nodes, we're of course tasked with going back to the security node, connecting the holograms, and making our way back to where we came from, the Monty cart. But before riding it, I want to mention some things I forgot to before. For one, even though there mostly isn't a collision down below, and there is a death barrier, the map itself is still fun to explore in this barren state if we were to simulate collision again. Large portions of the map are missing beneath the fog, and it looks like a trippy dream. Doorways open up to nowhere, and we can just walk right up to the edge of the world. Everything is abandoned still, like the Monty golf course that runs through this camper, but nothing feels cluttered with debris since it's all gone. The virtual world beneath the fog is relatively the same, although it is certainly more eerie. Up top of the start of this area, there is a section that introduces the slippery floor, as a box and barrel fall off the catwalk. Now these two objects are physical objects, so they enter a free fall when they plummet. And the way the physics work usually means there's an element of randomness to their fall, so we can watch them fall or bounce off things on their way down. Now, to ensure that these objects are also gone in the virtual world, the developers have both event copies play at the same time. However, there is an oversight with this, because depending on how the barrel and box fall, it's possible to look around in the virtual world and see the box and barrel from the normal world just fall through the map. So we can see this barrel up top enter the virtual world down below. Below the map, we'll eventually see all the objects falling, unless one of them got stuck on collision somewhere, which is possible. Anyways, swapping back to getting the heck out of here, if we charge the conduits, it will grant us access to leave. You can see that once completing the charges, the Monty cart spawns instantaneously. Taking this ride out doesn't hide much from the player, minus the fact that Cassie's arms disappear while taking the trip. However, towards the end, as the cart is coming to a stop, you can see it shift slightly and then a duplicate cart spawns within. It stays like this until exiting the cart. Other than seeing an excess amount of garbage at the end of this hall, and seeing that the previous area now only has several objects loaded in, not much else is going on behind the scenes, so we'll head upstairs to the next area. Most players are familiar with this spot, as it's where the game pauses to load. Going far out of bounds while this takes place shows how the previous area unloads and shortly after loads in the next section. Heading upstairs leads to the last section of Chapter 3. Before going in there though, I deleted the debris that blocks the player from going up the stairs. As you can see, the deletion only gets rid of the collision, so I head through this junk and find a very inevitable dead end. Viewing this room from out of bounds doesn't reveal much, aside from these machines appearing to not be plugged in. As I was looking at these, I did notice a tiny dot in the distance. Going in for a closer look reveals that it's a lonely little floodlight. This must be somewhere in Chapter 4 if I had to guess. Coming back to this room though, I did notice something curious. The conveyor that leads up to this door seems to interact with the player when being within a certain proximity. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that this is the same conveyor and door that we see Chica going up and through after charging the last conduit panel. As this part happens, Chica simply just spawns on this conveyor, creepily sliding. We can see that Chica's speed increases as she reaches the incline of the conveyor and makes her way out of sight. However, following this scene, we make our way through this conveyor tunnel and reach the end of Ruin's 3rd chapter. Chapter 4 of FNAF Ruin takes place after the Monty Golf Catwalks as we head into the bakery area. So before entering Chapter 4, we can see Chica on a conveyor belt that takes her off screen. Following this, we go through this shaft where we officially enter Chapter 4. Here we encounter the entity messing with the anti-mask device. This follows with the next section involving Chica as she's dumped from the conveyor, eventually patrolling this area in which we need to navigate. There's an arcade game here that we can play, but moving on leads to a security node we need to clear in order to progress. This leads us to the Upper East server room, which involves traversing through these big virtual rooms. Some anomaly detecting is required. That also includes this encounter with a giant-sized version of the entity. The chapter then concludes right before interacting with our poor friend Roxy. So as Chapter 4 begins, Cassie gets drawn to a cutscene where we spy on that rabbit thing, as Cassie calls it. The entity eventually sees us, resulting in it jump-scaring Cassie right out of the mask. Going off camera shows that the entity spawns below the map before making its appearance, menacingly plotting in the void. I noticed during this interaction, we can see how the entity flickers upon materializing before us. Slowing this down reveals that the model of the entity is actually just going down and up repeatedly. So because this movement is normally faster, it creates this visual of the entity flickering. I tried bringing Cassie down here during this cutscene, but as you can see, the game would continuously pull us back to the position up top where the cutscene initiated. So instead, I went down there before the cutscene. Unfortunately, nothing really happens, other than the fact that we just took a shortcut and could push forward without this device being powered up. But let's move back up and move on. So we unlock a door and make our way into this next area where we encounter Chica's ugly mug. Normally, another brief cutscene takes place with Chica's body being carried along a conveyor belt, where she eventually falls out of sight. Then, this giant, goofy cupcake decides to yeet us down into this next area. Watching this take place from another angle is pretty funny looking, as Cassie's arms flail in the air while falling. However, if we go over to where Chica is during all of this, we'll see that she just spawns in on the conveyor belt. Although watching her be carried along this motionless conveyor is strange looking, it makes sense. Why put more work into something the player is normally never going to see? When Chica falls out of sight, the body clips through this container as it lands. A few moments later, she slightly rises up off the ground, eventually disappearing. I was thinking Chica's model would have gone underground like the entity, but I was wrong. Normally, coming around this bend is where we'll see Chica whipping around all about the place as she's continuously electrocuted. It's during this walk that Chica spawns into the container. So, I decided to break into this area and join in on the electrifying fun. And well, funnily enough, Chica gives us zero attention while being over here. I'm even able to climb into this container with her, overall making for a pretty funny encounter. She will remain in this state until we press on, and proceed with the sequence of events that normally transpires. Continuing on normally shows that Chica will then teleport out of this container and walk over to some garbage where she starts chowing down. Just look at her in all her glory. I should have realized this, but I came back into this area after she left the container and quickly found out that I shouldn't have gotten so close, as she scares me half to death. Oof. Continuing as usual, Chica will walk out right in front of us, being completely oblivious to our presence. Going off camera shows that Chica instant transmissions over to this spot for this sequence. Following her while she walks off reveals that she eventually pulls another disappearing act, as I have no luck finding her model. A few moments later, she literally reappears for this instance where she's trying to grab this cupcake. Eventually she grabs it and walks off to the point where she'll stand and continuously munch on the cupcake, waiting for us to progress. Watching as we move forward shows that she'll despawn and respawn instantaneously, setting her up for our next encounter with her. So with that said, we access the security camera station, divert Chica away from our path, and move on. Before actually continuing, I decided to give Chica's feeding frenzy a closer look. If we click through the arcade machine, you'll see that there's another screen behind the screen that we normally see, both displaying the same exact images. I think originally these screens were down low like real arcade cabinets, but because of the player's height, you wouldn't see the actual screen. So they added a second screen up front to be more visible. Sometimes arcade cabinets can have glass where this top screen is, or it can be reflective too. Starting the game up, you'll see that it plays like most top-down multi-directional shooters. However, we're able to move the camera around in here, and it's quite the trip. Traveling down to this checker platform shows just how big it actually is. Going in closer to Chica shows that the pizza slice and crosshair are slightly higher up than her, essentially layered upon one another. Going underneath the floor, you'll see these extra floating objects. They spin in place indefinitely. I played some of the game with different camera angles, and it was a bit disorienting. Viewing what is supposed to be a 2D game in 3D is pretty neat though. Progressing through the waves, I take a closer look at the multicolored ball that you face and then decide to do a mini challenge. Placing my camera below, we get this neat view where the post-processing creates after images, or perhaps maybe the frames aren't refreshing. But during this, my controls are inverted, making it a little annoying to control. After defeating it though, my game crashed. However, when I went to reload the game, I realized I may have made a slight error. So this happens very quickly, but while loading in, my screen was completely white for a brief moment, and then it looks like I got shot way out of the map, flying by what appeared to be a floating T-pose Chica. I unfortunately fall into the foggy void and lose sight of everything. At first I didn't realize why this was occurring, but then I realized I was tampering with the game's speed and had the game speed essentially set to 0 for a moment, forgetting to set it back. So the UI menus and map loading can still work in this paused state, but loading a map only loads the scene itself. And so my hunch is that none of the other objects in the world loaded in, and our character was moved over to this world position on spawn before being moved to where we should be. It threw me into Stephen King's The Mist, where I would fall forever. So I decided to use the camera mode and look for this T-pose Chica, and lo and behold, I see this tiny white dot in the distance and pursue it. Turns out this Chica has been out here all along. I tried going back to interact with Chica throughout Chapter 4 to see if it was in fact using this T-pose Chica. Turns out it does not, and I believe this Chica is from the beginning of the game, the one we found in a previous chapter. Anyways, when I was initially trying to figure out what happened with this sequence, I'd fly from the beginning of Chapter 4 to the arcade machine, cutting my time spent to get there. In the midst of doing this, I noticed that I broke Chica, with her model not showing up during this quick look back. This is due to me skipping the normal sequence of events. Normally, your character looks back and sees Chica closing in, but because her model isn't there to load in as intended, I'm free to roam where I please in this area, with her never showing up. Now that this area is safe per se, I decided to try and get up on different structures within here, resulting with some that had collision, but not very much. I push on through and surprisingly still get the jump scare when exiting this area. Slowing this down and breaking off camera gives us a funny spectacle of Chica fighting with a pair of arms wielding a flashlight. Chica sadly just disappears a few moments after the concrete wall comes down. This next part involves breaching a few nodes that are scattered throughout this area. This in turn will give us access to this main security node to clear it. Before doing this, I decided to explore this area with clipping in and out of the map. That's when I noticed quite a few objects floating out in the void. Moving in for a closer look, I immediately realized what I'm looking at. We're looking at the Upper East server room, but as you can see, only certain objects are currently loaded, which includes the entity, the 3 anomalies, a couple of floating doors, the security station, and this floodlight. Not sure why these are loaded in, but they're out here. There's nothing else really going on off screen in this area, so I tried seeing where Chica's model comes from while being activated. Sadly, she just appears in the bathroom, as you can see from this angle. I tried escaping while in this view and thought I was in the clear, but sort of forgot to take my mask off, resulting with a death blow through the wall. Moving out from here involves going through a few halls that lead to the Upper East server room. Although there are a couple doors here that normally don't open, they unsurprisingly lead nowhere. Unfortunately, with the server room, not a lot is going on here outside of what we normally see. As I did some out-of-bounds exploring, I was curious to see if we could possibly walk on any of the Freddy debris below the walkways we normally traverse. However, everything down here has no collision. The death barrier hinders my efforts as well. Sad face. So I do some more anomaly detecting and realize I should probably wait a second before entering this next area. As soon as the player enters this next section, they're given what appears to be a set time before the screen is eventually consumed by static and the player dies. Luckily, this doesn't hinder me from looking around with the camera, as I technically haven't entered the area with Cassie. This allows me to get a closer look at the entity, but we sort of did this earlier when the room wasn't loaded. I had an idea though. I thought that if I deleted the large entity, maybe that would stop the inevitable insta-kill. This, doesn't work because I'm unable to delete this darn rabbit. You can see the wall is deleted, but my mission is foiled. Once again though, nothing outside the normal gameplay really occurs here. So I detect the anomalies and press on. And with this, Chapter 4 comes to a close in FNAF Ruin. So, we've just gotten out of the server rooms from the previous chapter, which brings us to Chapter 5. It begins with this encounter with Roxy, as we're tasked with following her. This leads to some node breaching, along with an unavoidable encounter with the entity, as we detect the anomalies with the security camera station. However, if done quickly enough, we can avoid the danger, and breach this security node in the Glamrock Beauty Salon section. We'll then traverse through this Western-themed area, which leads to this interaction with Monty Boy. After our electrifying encounter with Monty, the player will journey through this under-construction zone, which leads us to the beginning of Chapter 6. Going back to the beginning of Chapter 5 though, we can go out of bounds and get a look at the entirety of this Glamrock Beauty Salon area. The virtual world we enter when putting the mask on is set below the real world once again. But let's take a look at that cutscene with Roxy. She can be seen crying as she states, "You're not trying hard enough." Cassie can't help but feel bad for her, as she says poor Roxy, which alerts Roxy to our presence. While Cassie is normally behind cover, we can see Roxy get up and slide to where she needs to be, as this cutscene takes place. Luckily for Cassie's sake, Roxy hears, Gregory, which causes her to disregard Cassie to pursue him. Watching this unfold from a different perspective, we can see Roxy stops after making her leap through the door once she's out of the player's sight. Her model will end up freezing out here and eventually despawn as Cassie's dialogue finishes. During all this, I noticed we can't enter this cutscene while wearing the mask, as it will just take the mask off as the scene begins. However, if we go down below, prior to the cutscene, we can find Roxy's VR model sitting down here. As the cutscene begins, the model does end up despawning, which brings to question the presence of the VR Roxy model to begin with. After we're done talking to Trust Me Bro Gregory, we can open this door and find Roxy continuing her pursuit. Deleting the door, we can see she isn't there, and it isn't until we open the door that she is loaded back in. The way she runs as she flails her arms about is great, but following her, we'll see that she makes her way through these doors and ends up disappearing in the western room once again. We must now breach these nodes, which will lead to this interaction with the entity. It's always cool to see the entity in slow motion, as it digitally teleports all about. But I digress. At one point, the virtual Chica had been sent after me by the entity, so I tried deleting her from existence to avoid death. But this does not stop Chica from devouring us. She killed me from beyond the grave. Moving on, we can see Chica comes to rest here in the bathroom, and will kill the player if you get too close. However, if the player successfully gets to the 20th wave of Chica's feeding frenzy, the minigame from Chapter 4, they'll be awarded Chica's voice box. Having the voice box at this part allows us to repair her. Cassie will reluctantly do this, with Chica activating briefly as she says, "I smell pizza," before shutting down. This was definitely an interesting interaction, but as I was exploring this area with the camera, you can see my screen began changing colors, dipping in and out of darkness. I couldn't make out what was happening at the time, but I thought the entity was trying to get me, and when I came back to my character as I took the mask off, I realized it put me into the void. Goodbye, cruel world. Coming back in another instance, I realized all this distortion I was experiencing was in fact from the entity killing us. Well, more so Chica. Watching Chica get Cassie from this perspective is interesting, because once the virtual Chica reaches us, we're then forced out of our mask, resulting with our character being pulled up to the real world. At this point, Chica has Cassie on the floor as she lowers towards her, all while peering into her soul with those sad, disturbing eyes. You'll notice what appears to be a bag hanging off Chica's waist, and seeing it from this perspective is definitely strange. It moves around oddly through the entirety of this sequence. I am curious to know what's inside of it though. Food for thought? Now that we have all the nodes done, we can move on and pursue Roxy. In this little western section, we can go back into this area as we find this door within a wall, which was interesting. There's also what appears to be a ride that's over here that I wanted to try to get on. However, this results in instant death basically. As you can see, it doesn't look like much was back here to begin with. So with that, let's push on as this next area loads in. This is where we encounter Monty Boy, aka the Terminator. We can find him spawning here in this slide as he prepares to drop down and enter the scene. He'll fall graciously as he makes his way to us. I thought I'd try shrinking myself here to see if I could get up close and personal with Monty, and we are clearly too small for him to interact with us. All the water around him started to glitch out as I did this, slightly bogging my game down. I'm assuming it probably has something to do with me standing under him, as he's trying to turn to get me, but we occupy the same position, thus repeating his water interaction over and over. However, we can take a closer look at Monty when he does get his claws on Cassie. We've covered his jump scare in a previous chapter, but let's take a look at it again with water. When he enters into the jump scare animation, he leaps out of the water as he gets a hold of Cassie and proceeds to push her into the water. He'll then go bite her as she tries to hold him off. This struggle, like all the other jump scare animations, occurs much quicker than what we're currently seeing, as it is slowed down. Luckily though, for Cassie's sake, our story doesn't end like this. Through this second door, we end up putting Monty in an electrifying situation. A brief cutscene takes place as we nearly escape and watch him get destroyed. You'll see that he spawns within these pallets as it begins. It's probably fair to say that we won't be seeing Monty again though, as he ends up clipping through these stairs, where he despawns in this watery grave. This leads us through a construction area where not much takes place outside of normal gameplay, but this does bring us into Chapter 6. So in this chapter we make our way into Roxy Raceway. We eventually catch up to Roxy as we're tasked with using multiple security camera station intercoms to essentially guide Roxy. This in turn will allow us to use Roxy to break a couple of doors down that we need to eventually go through. We have a run-in with a rogue race car too, along with his close encounter with Roxy as well. This then follows with lots of halls and stairs that eventually lead us into Chapter 7. Going back to the beginning of Roxy Raceway, we can see that it's the only location loaded in as we enter it. As you can see, not much is happening out of bounds. Coming back in though, most players will know that there's a staff bot that has seen better days here, as it jump scares us with kindness, which I can say did scare me the first time I played through the game. When we charge these conduits, we can see Roxy spawns right by this door that we need to get through. Roxy will just pace through this section until we get her to crash through the door with the intercom. Instead, I tried going around her as I prepared to destroy the door myself. I mean, I could have just erased her from the game, but that felt a bit direct. So I destroyed the door, but then I got really confused here as I believed I had bypassed her, but I could hear her talking as if she was up ahead of me. Using the camera, I figured I see her in the path ahead, only to find that she is still lurking around the first section. So I guess I semi-broke it? However, as soon as you make this turn, we'll see that she spawns up ahead of us as the other one disappears, or they just moved the same instance. In my confusion while dealing with this Roxy, I tried breaking out of bounds here, seeing if I could explore more of this area with Cassie. I unfortunately fell through the floor during one of these attempts, which ended up killing me. I also ended up just getting stuck a lot, which is worse than death, honestly. Let's take a closer look at Roxy when she gets her metal claws on us. When Roxy's jumpscare animation begins, we can see she ferociously crouches down at us as she prepares to pick Cassie up. She'll lift us high into the air and slam us to the ground, as she then readies to bite our face. This of course is all playing at a much slower speed, and normally takes place fairly fast. But as you can see, it's quite a terrifying experience, no matter how you look at it. No more adventures for this pair of floating arms. Once I reloaded, Roxy was back in the first section of this area, which didn't last long, because if we progress from here and clear the conduits for this door, Roxy will jump scare us as we try to move on. Watching this from another perspective, we can see how she will just appear behind the player. She's screaming for her eyes to be returned to her, as she realizes she's possibly overreacting, promptly letting Cassie go. The door will shut, and Roxy will freeze, immediately despawning. I can't help but feel bad for Roxy, as she seems to be conflicted with her actions throughout the entirety of the DLC. I mean, I'd probably be losing it too if my eyes were missing, but I digress. If we jump back a scene though, you'll know that we had this run-in with this race car. A cutscene will occur with the car's lights turning on as it begins to screech towards us. If the player isn't fast enough to react, the car can kill them. Watching this occur from this perspective shows that once the car hits us, it simply deletes us from existence. So to mix things up, I tried to counter this race car with a suit of armor. As in Freddy. Joke's on me though, because the Freddy that spawns in has very little charge, and when I tried this, he turned on me. The result was interesting though. After climbing into Freddy, he almost immediately begins our death animation with him. The race car is coming at us during all of this though, which results in an incoming head-on collision with Freddy. He'll end up getting pushed slightly as he continues destroying Cassie. It's too bad the car couldn't have saved us. This was not the end result I was expecting with this, but here we are. Thanks for nothing, Freddy. The previous area we just went through will unload, which we can see since I decided to delete the door. Looking around though, various objects are floating about out here, including one of the Roxys that we bypassed earlier, who is also falling in this white abyss. We can get a better look at all of this if we switch the view, along with part of the next chapter loading in as well. We could even see the security node wires that we'll encounter soon, and even an old friend who we'll get back to in a little bit. He's floating out here just waiting to be discovered. There's also this random sink below the map. For what reason? I have no idea. And along with this, there's a red curtain out of bounds as well, which may be further into the chapter, or perhaps a previous chapter. I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, I came back to this Roxy that was falling, and it appears this fall is never ending. Bon voyage, Roxy! Moving onward, we'll have a conversation with Gregory about the sinkhole under the raceway, with the door eventually opening. When it comes to being out of bounds here, not a lot is happening, so we proceed towards Chapter 7's area. Chapter 7 begins with some random halls that eventually lead to the Bonnie Bowl area. This entire area consists of multiple camera stations, along with 4 child nodes we need to deactivate. The mini music men are in this section and can be found guarding most of the nodes. The player needs to pull these musical peeps away by using the camera stations to trigger distractions. It can be fairly difficult, as some of these guys can linger and surprise the player if they aren't careful. I've even found myself having issues with them responding to the intercom. They just decide to not move. When the jumpscare animation begins for these little fellas, you can see one that appears in our face, with another down to our left, and one that's floating up above us. Throughout this animation, each one takes turns harassing Cassie, starting with the front and center music man, followed by the one below our normal sight, and finally with the third one dropping down to join the fun. This all, of course, takes place much faster than what we're observing here, but it was interesting to see from this perspective nonetheless. At any rate, once deactivating all the nodes and breaching the security node, the player will proceed to the end of this chapter, which involves going down this trippy digital wormhole that eventually ends with this terrifying encounter with the entity as we load into Chapter 8. So going back, as we're making our way to the bowling area, we will come across some rooms we can normally enter while wearing the mask. I got into these rooms without the mask to see if there was anything interesting. However, I didn't really find anything, but when I was messing around and fell through the map, I noticed this big fancy hallway under the level. I realized it can normally be seen from the bowling alley area through the damaged floor, but all that's down here is a couple of what I believe could be air hockey tables. Regardless, I tried coming down here as Cassie with the unsurprising result of falling through the floor. Unglorious. Before I do any more exploring though, I'm gonna go ahead and just delete these music men, as I really can't do anything with them outside of dying. I did try going mini to see if I could have got up close and personal, but as you can see, that's a F in the chat. Even hiding in the debris doesn't save you from them. They are relentless. However, back in the bowling alley area, a secret area awaits us. If the player goes throughout the game deactivating all these wet floor bots, they can gain access to this area, which has this creepy ritual-like scene taking place. It consists of a demolished Glamrock Bonnie, who can be found laying on the ground with these 4 wet floor bots placed around him. It's quite the scene. Judging by the claw marks on his torn open stomach, a popular theory is that Monty ended up destroying Bonnie, which is kinda sad given the earlier story we saw of Monty being inspired and also given an opportunity by Bonnie. Once we get all these child nodes deactivated in the Bonnie Bowl area though, we'll end up heading back to the main security node and then progressing through this little stage. I could have just deleted these curtains to begin with, but obviously that wouldn't be nearly as fun. Once inside, we'll normally end up taking this trippy slide out of here, which ultimately leads to the next chapter. I did a little exploring though, and managed to get out of bounds here. We can see the vent that we normally crouch through to access the wormhole, as I'm able to walk on this floor out here. I ended up jumping on the vent and was able to walk on top of it. Getting to the top though, you'll see that I automatically dropped into the vent as the wormhole cutscene begins. This scene has our player falling through this digital looping tunnel for quite a while, as we see various wireframed objects fly by us. Eventually, we find ourselves face to face with the entity, as the screen fades to white, concluding Chapter 7. Checking out the sequence from Out of Bounds reveals that it's not quite as it seems in regards to how we're actually traveling through it. It appears as if we're swirling all about while we're in here, but you'll see as we enter, we're actually put in this endless ring. This makes our trip through this portal appear longer than it is, as we continuously loop inside it. Eventually, we are redirected with the path changing. Beyond the entity's head, we can see the path ends, which we never reach anyways, as we're loaded into another instance. However, when I got out of the free cam during this, I realized that I never loaded out of the section due to the camera mode glitching the game. Most of the surrounding area was unloaded though, leaving me stranded on this vent. I tried starting the sequence over, but couldn't take the wormhole again. This sadly led to my death. But with that, Chapter 7 comes to a close. After leaving the wormhole, Chapter 8 begins with us needing to take this long vent that leads into the Fazer blast area. Once navigating through this rubble, we can make our way further into the room where we need to enter this digital doorway. It's here where we need to hurry and find the 2 nodes in which we need to breach. After breaching the main security node, we need to escape through another doorway that has appeared. This brings us to a lovely reunion with Glamrock Freddy, which turns terrifying very quickly as we run for our life through this maze of debris. After successfully evading him, we'll have one more encounter with him where we need to deactivate this device quickly so we can evade Freddy by entering the virtual world. This immediately follows with this horrific encounter with our Music Man and event, once again having us flee in terror. After escaping the Music Man, Chapter 8 will then conclude once we make our way through another vent and various halls as we enter into the depths below Roxy Raceway. Going back to the start of this chapter, if we go out of bounds, we'll see once we've cleared the fog that it's actually pretty dark and fairly hard to see anything, with the virtual world looking pretty cool though. However, once we've brightened up the view, we can see that our journey up ahead of us is only partially loaded in, with various objects floating about in the black void. Teleporting out here, we can bypass the loading of this area and get a closer look at the Freddy that's floating out here, along with the security node wiring down below. Out of curiosity, I tried teleporting on top of this Freddy to possibly get him to activate, like he normally does when we encounter him. Unfortunately, this resulted with a quick slip and fall to my death. Speaking of, during another slip and fall incident, I initiated the loading sequence for the rest of the Fazer Blast area, as you can see. There isn't much to this entire area when it comes to being out of bounds. Something did happen to catch my eye way on the distance though, but once reaching it, I could see it was just a slab of flooring with a wall sitting on it, just floating out here in the great beyond. Other than admiring the surroundings of this area, not much occurs outside of normal security node breaching gameplay. However, this brings us to Freddy, who I've got a bone to pick with. First off, I tried deleting him before he even had a chance of getting up for the cutscene. I thought I was in the clear at first, but then he appeared as I tried to pass, initiating the interaction we have with him normally. This was a well-played move by Freddy, so I decided to let him get me so we could take a closer look at this death animation. Everyone wins! So as he approaches, he'll leap at Cassie as he grasps the space in front of Cassie's arms. He'll then lift her high into the air like he's raising a glass for a toast, eventually bringing her down to his torso, where he then ends her. This of course takes place much quicker and is slowed down for your viewing pleasure. But I digress. What a way to go, right? However, it's now time to bring in some backup. Fight fire with fire. Yes, we brought another Freddy into the mix, and once I manage to get him the space he needs to walk through here, we're gonna see what happens with this Freddy vs. Freddy battle. So I climbed into this bad boy and initiated the interaction with the other Freddy. It was fun to watch it play out, and we're actually quite safe from Headless Freddy. However, now we're faced with a new issue. This Freddy that we're inside of. We're, of course, only granted a specific amount of time while in here. This didn't stop me from messing with the other Freddy for a few moments, but it did ultimately force me to rush through this area so I didn't get devoured by my Freddy suit. Once we reach this drop though, we are safe. Freddy won't drop down after us and will just linger. Deleting him as the chase begins proves to be the best option though, which allows us to casually walk through this terrifying gauntlet and truly appreciate its horrific beauty. We can find that a lot of bots were sacrificed in the making of this course. After escaping though, we're only granted a brief moment to relax as we end up getting cut off by Freddy, as he's now in front of us. We can see how he just simply loads in behind this wall prior to blasting through it for the scene. We can traditionally escape him here, but I delete him. See ya. I would have loved to see a more exciting interaction between these Freddys, but they're never meant to meet anyways. Moving on, we can see the remainder of this chapter has loaded in. We now have this interaction with this terrifying music man that ambushes us as we begin to use the vent. We can see he's not lingering above and simply loads in while this all takes place. He wants blood though, and if we're not, fast enough, he will feed. The thing is though, you can actually do this chase backwards. If you know the path, you can do this entire chase while looking at this creepy little fella, which was pretty funny to discover. However, when this guy does get a hold of us, we can see that our arms will immediately vanish. He'll then begin to raise 2 of his 6 legs up like so, while clapping away with his sharp, rusty cymbals. The jump scare then ends in static once it's nearly face to face with Cassie. Instead of dying though, I pulled a fast one on this little guy as I got behind him with teleportation while he was chasing me. If we follow him, we can see he graciously, but horrifically, treks through this vent. We're behind him though, so once approaching the end, he'll simply turn around and shortly after disappear. Which is what I assume he does if we evade him normally as well. The couple remaining vents and halls of this chapter don't consist of much, but there's a loading area here that will freeze our position as it loads. Watching from a different perspective, we can see it's loading the depths of Roxy Raceway, leading us into the final chapter. Chapter 9 begins with Cassie conversing with deepfake Gregory about shutting down all these security nodes. Gregory informs her of one more remaining node though, the last remaining node being Roxy, and we can clearly feel Cassie's confliction with being given the task of deactivating her. We'll go through a few various rooms, eventually making our way into this more open area, where we'll find Roxy stuck underneath a forklift. An emotional scene will play out once you approach her and put on the mask. We then do the sad, but necessary step to progress from here, as we deactivate Roxy. Bon voyage once again, Miss Roxy. From here we'll make our way down some scaffolding and enter into this underground sub-level of the raceway, where we'll find an elevator. This takes us further down into the ruin, and while progressing, we'll see wreckage all about, as we enter this narrow hole that goes even further down. This hole leads to this big and pretty cool looking cave, which is where our flashlight decides to clock out of the adventure. After admiring the view though, and collecting a few of these Faz tokens, we'll make our way through this rundown hall, which leads to this interaction with Candy Cadet. This follows with some stairs and various rooms with burners in the floors. Smells like a burn trap to me. Eventually, after some more venturing further down, we'll find ourselves inching very close to the end of this entire DLC. Putting the mask on and using this machine will initiate this interaction with the entity, as it digitizes out of the machine, being its last final effort with trying to stop us. After all this unfolds, the door behind us will open, and we need to start up this forklift to break out our dear friend Gregory. Of course, most of you will know that as this cutscene takes place, it becomes evident that we've been bamboozled, as these red eyes peer at us from the dark corner. This creepy figure, known as the Mimic, continues to try to claim as Gregory, as it aggressively approaches us. Roxy comes out of nowhere to save the day though, as she gives us a chance to escape. We'll hear the two of them fighting as the possible real Gregory gets a hold of us over the radio. He'll tell us the obvious about it being a trap, also informing us his friend has access to building maps, so he'll give us instructions to follow. That's when the metal Rizzler will appear as it yeets the forklift, which then kicks off the final chase in the game. Gregory will then give us directions, helping us navigate through this area. The panic-inducing chase eventually leads to this door that we must quickly but patiently open. Once getting this door open, it will follow with the Mimic nearly getting us as we make our escape. Gregory will then come on over the speaker, explaining how Cassie was never supposed to go down there, but it's not her fault. He then adjusts his anime glasses and says they can't risk being followed, as the scene implies that he cut the elevator loose. Regardless, it comes tumbling down as Cassie screams, with the game abruptly coming to an end during the standard ending. With that said, let's go back to the beginning of this chapter when we were loading into the Roxy Raceway area. Going in for a closer look, we can see these giant marionette-looking dudes floating in the air inside these go-karts, which are in the virtual world. I found these guys to be very creepy, but also spectacular to look at once turning off the fog. Before addressing Roxy under the forklift though, I, of course, had to try and get out of bounds. Ultimately, this led to the usual clipping through the ground and getting stuck scenarios. I was hesitant walking out here because I didn't want to clip through and die. I eventually did find myself just taking a detour to get to Roxy, as I broke through the wall behind her. This emotional interaction with Roxy in the virtual world is rough, but if we go take a look at her in the real world while this plays out, we can find her still struggling to remove the forklift. When we go to put the Faz wrench into her eye socket, we can see our flashlight to our side as we do this. In the midst of checking this out though, I was able to see this screen in this peculiar view. The one we normally use to connect the dots essentially. It was black instead of blue, and when I went back to my normal view, its size remained small. So I can only assume my messing around contributed to this. Once completing her deactivation though, we can go back up top and see that the real-world Roxy is now in sync with the virtual one, as they both deactivate in sequence. I did try to save Roxy by deleting the forklift that's on her, but as you can see it doesn't exactly work, and I'm just able to walk through it now. Going out of bounds here, I noticed a couple of objects way out in the distance, so I decided to investigate. Getting closer, we'll see some flooring of some sort here, along with, yes, an elevator. This actually happens to be the elevator we end up taking shortly after deactivating Roxy. Looking at the elevator we normally enter, and going out of bounds shows that they're very far away from one another. So what's happening here is that the player will enter this elevator, and once they hit the button, if we zoom out, we can see that the area we're currently in unloads as we're teleported instantly to the other elevator. As the entirety of this final area loads in around the elevator we're teleported into. Because of the way the game was broken though, with the camera being dislodged, while discovering all this, I went to take back control of Cassie and found myself stuck in the original elevator we were in. Once I deleted the elevator doors, you can see the area we were supposed to load into, and there's something out in the distance over by it. So, of course, going in for a closer look reveals, well, a T-posing entity, an endoskeleton, and Cassie's arms, which is hard to see as they're all clipping through one another. There's also this beat-up costume that's here, along with a metal-like claw machine, the lost cousin of the Scooper. This all floats out of here throughout the rest of the game, and they'll be called upon if we initiate them as we make our way to the game's ending. I did end up trying to teleport myself out onto these guys, and failed miserably, as none of them had collision. But we'll get back to this Scooper and costume later to discuss where they come in, as we progress further. Continuing on normally is where we'll find ourselves reaching this cave. We can see when the flashlight dies, Cassie will struggle to get it working again, as her arms freeze in position and the flashlight briefly duplicates itself, right before disappearing altogether. It might be fair to say the arms probably swap with the ones out here in the void. However, I had this weird glitch end up occurring when I was trying to collect one of the fast tokens, and it simply wouldn't pick up. Take a listen. Terrifying. So I can't emphasize enough on how cool this cave looks overall. Between the lighting and waterfalls, I was simply just waiting for a great fairy to appear from Zelda and take Cassie away from this FNAF nightmare. After leaving this cave area is where we'll have this interaction with this robot known as Candy Cadet. It'll spout off, "I am the Candy Cadet, come here. I have candy all day, every day. Candy, candy, candy." However, Candy Cadet has more to say, which is based on how many fast tokens we've collected throughout the game. We can find these tokens in the following locations. One can be found at the beginning of Chapter 7, another in this locker room area, which is right after the chase sequence we have with the Music Man event. Then there are two more, which can be found in this big cave we were just in, and right after leaving the cave, we'll find another in the back right corner of this hall. Another one is in the very next room, right before Candy Cadet. But the remaining token is in one of the burner rooms, which requires us to progress beyond Candy Cadet. Having all the tokens that we just talked about though, will result with Candy Cadet telling the following story.
Now I will tell you a story about a mother and her little boy who lived alone in a cabin in the dark woods. There was a monster in the woods, but the mother caught it and kept it locked in the basement. The monster always made scary noises at night, but the mother would tell the boy not to worry because it could never get out. Then she would sing the boy a lullaby to sleep. One day, the monster stopped growling and instead listened and learned the lullaby. The next day, Mother went up to find food. The monster sang the lullaby from the basement. The little boy heard the lullaby and opened the door.
Basically, this foreshadows the events that are taking place in the game. The monster singing the lullaby from the basement may be the mimic pretending to be Gregory, hence luring us down here to free it. Let's move on though. From here, we'll make our way into this room where we can find what I believe is Gregory's backpack. However, we need to go over to this computer and proceed with shutting it down. This is where the entity shows up for his final appearance. Safe to say, this is the T-posing entity from the void. Watching from this perspective though, we can watch how it'll just spawn in behind the machine. Its right arm appears to be in a fairly uncomfortable looking position, as you can see. Deleting the machine the entity normally comes out of and watching this play out in slow motion is great. This rabbit is truly a digital nightmare, with the slow motion letting us take in every terrifying moment. Eventually it will get sucked back into this machine, but because it's deleted, we can see their model goes into this contorted position after being pulled back, where the entity eventually despawns. Poor Cassie, she just can't see that it's trying to help. Anyways, now we need to break this concrete wall down by starting up this forklift. Going into the room prior to breaking in, we can see that the mimic isn't in here yet. As the forklift breaks through the concrete though, we can actually see that the concrete wall slides down to the ground, as it's not actually breaking. This, of course, isn't noticeable when normally viewing it, as the scene plays out quickly with the debris playing tricks on our eyes, making it appear as if we actually broke the wall. Before doing this though, I wanted to see if anything would happen if we got into the room without breaking the concrete. The answer is, well, we can get in here, and just as I suspected, going near the way we'd normally come in will initiate the cutscene we get with the mimic. Entering this room normally this time though, we'll see the walkie-talkie spawns in before the mimic itself. When the mimic does spawn in, we can see the walkie-talkie is in its stomach basically. This makes sense though, given it's normally a very dark scene, and we wouldn't see any of that. However, it is funny to watch as it shoots out the walkie towards us from its back. While this is occurring, we can see that Roxy is loaded in behind us, waiting for her cue to jump into the scene. When Roxy initiates, she uses instant transmission to make this save, which is interesting to watch play out. The two of them will freeze, as normally we're watching this from Cassie's point of view as she runs. We can clearly see here though that Roxy isn't winning this fight. I mean, we can assume this is the outcome, but you can see how the mimic has got a good hold of her head, and it actually looks like it's ripping her head off. Jeez. Bon voyage again, Roxy. She just keeps coming back. The mimic and Roxy both vanish while we're talking to the supposed real Gregory. Once we're done talking to him, the mimic will appear again along with the forklift, because I deleted it in this particular instance. But now we have a chase on our hands. Or do we? Yeah, I deleted the mimic. Now we can have a nice relaxing stroll through this would-be death race. I will say though, not much is revealed, even with the luxury of not being chased. However, if we take a left at the end of these caves instead of a right, we'll find this Freddy cutout that will allow us to put the mask on. This will put us into the end sequence, which is one of 3 endings that are possible. Gregory will transmit over the radio, saying he's okay and that he found a safe spot to hide, as Cassie can be heard panicking. The screen will fade to black as the credits roll. We can find this ending just out of bounds of the level though, allowing us to take a longer peek at it. We can see Vanessa, Gregory, and Helpy are just chilling on this hillside as they enjoy some ice cream in the sun. You can see how the entirety of the scenery has multiple layers throughout it as well. It's kinda sad when it comes to this end though, as I'm not entirely sure how to take it. Did she die? Is she safe? Was it glorious? Definitely food for thought. In another instance, when I was attempting the common ending, which we went over in the recap, I noticed once I was trying to open the elevator, the mimic was acting funny. It was lingering in the back of this hall as the music got more intense, when suddenly he zipped up to Cassie and immediately destroyed her. It definitely made me jump. While we're here, let's take a look at the death animation with the mimic, as it's definitely neat to see from this perspective. If I'm gonna be honest here, I don't believe the mimic ever lays a metal finger on her body throughout this entire sequence. That is fortunate for Cassie, I suppose. However, you can see the mimic's feet are clipping through the ground as it eventually swats Cassie, ultimately putting us into the static death screen. Now for the last ending we haven't gone over, the player must go to specific camera stations throughout the game that have secret cameras we can discover by zooming out on their minimap, as you can see here. The first camera station with this is in Chapter 1. It'll have Monty run by fairly quickly when you first open it. The next one is located in Chapter 3. It'll be the security camera station that's near this chair that is also a node. We'll then find the next one in Chapter 5. After breaching this node, we'll be tasked with going to this security camera station, which is where we'll find the secret camera. The final hidden camera is in Chapter 7 though. In Bonnie Bowl, we don't want to go to this station, but rather the one that is located near the bowling alleys. As you open these secret cameras, you'll see that there are doors that are opening during all of this. We're basically opening up the path we need to take at the end. However, this also causes our interaction with the mimic to be slightly different, as you'll see. The mimic will now be wearing this costume made up of, well, multiple costumes it appears. One thing I did not mention before is that this room we encounter the mimic in currently has 2 mascot costumes hidden within the darkness, an elephant and a bird. We can see these 2 costumes just sitting in the dark, with a third lion costume being found only in the game files. In this ending, the mimic quickly takes parts of all these costumes and hides within them. Everything plays out the same as the usual chase, except this time we're diverted to this path of open doors, which leads us to a room where we can seek safety. Hitting the button inside the room will initiate the cutscene where the mimic slaps against the glass as the metal scooper arm saves the day, as it grabs the mimic and pulls it into the smoke. We'll hear some mechanical noises, and eventually the smoke will clear, revealing the mimic motionless on the ground. The screen will then fade to black as the credits begin to roll. The first thing I noticed here was that the mimic will straight up disappear if you're a good distance away while entering this final room. However, if it's on your tail, it'll stand idle once you're locked in the room. So with that, I decided to delete the door to see what exactly would happen. To my surprise, it just turned around and began to leave, eventually unloading from the game. I for sure thought it was just gonna come into the room and devour me, but I guess not. On a separate note, I noticed the original end path is now blocked off by debris. So I decided to delete this obstruction for science because I wanted to see if it will confuse the mimic as we take this path once again. Turns out it does not confuse this Gregory imposter one bit though. It'll follow us right in as the hallway sequence begins while attempting to open the elevator door. Joke's on the mimic though, because I learned some new dance moves and electric slide right by this demonic robot. The mimic just continued towards the elevator, stopped, thought about its life choices, and then proceeded to re-engage with me. And with what I thought would be an instant death situation is now this unlikely chase I'm giving the mimic, as we're now about to do the scooper ending instead. Before taking a closer look at the scooper ending though, I went back and tried to get into the elevator without actually opening it. I figured it'd be safe and all, but turns out it's quite a temporary situation, as the mimic teleported into the elevator and jump scared me. Let's take a look at what's going on behind the smoke screen in this final scooper ending though. Once we hit this button, you can see it'll rush the window real fast. After slowing it down, we can see how there's a wall of smoke between us to create the illusion that the room is full of smoke. Looking closely at the mimic, we can see his face is in the mask, which is worth remembering as we watch this scene. The scooper pulls our terrifying friend back from the window, where it eventually despawns, which is something we normally cannot see. Then the mimic will reappear on the ground, motionless as the smoke eventually clears. What I found pretty neat is that if we take a closer look, we can see that it's just the costume on the ground here. The mimic is not in the costume, which means it was properly scooped and pulled out. A neat detail that is normally harder to see. Going back out of bounds though, we can see that the costume and scooper are no longer here unsurprisingly, as they've been called to our location for this cutscene. I gotta say though, with the game coming to an end, I'm still pretty upset that Roxy got the short end of the stick when it comes to this entire DLC. So, I decided to throw her a, going away party. As you can see, Vanny, Freddy, and a ton of the Mimic's cousins have accepted the invitation. They're all stomping away in a giant mosh pit, while Roxy is still getting crushed. Vanny is just kind of skipping in place and getting shoved around, which is a bit funny. While I was trying to get these guys in here, you'll see that it was quite the struggle, with them glitching out of bounds from where we were. Beyond the level's walls, the Mimics just continuously rain down from nowhere as they keep trying to spawn in, and it's a spectacular view. I wonder if this is what John Connor's nightmares look like. With that though, this concludes our Out of Bounds journey through the entirety of the FNAF Ruin DLC. I hope you all enjoyed this alternative look at this DLC, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers!